Okay. I guess hi everyone. Welcome to WSC Camp presented by OnePwaa. And this is, I guess, our WSC Camp debate seminar, part one. And so first of all, of course, you have to join the Mix Idea server for all of the WSC Camp debates. Yes. Okay, and with this, you have to go to access this link, and you'll only be able to debate once you've accessed and joined the server as well. So please remember to just do that if you haven't already. So yeah, yep, just join the event and everything should hopefully work smoothly. I'm being advised currently to wait a couple minutes for everyone to get here, so I guess we'll give it like 2 seconds. But I guess in the meantime, if you haven't already yet, please just go click on this link and join the event so that everything can later on run smoothly. Yeah, fun. Yeah, so if you're joining new to this live stream, please just click on this link. Make sure everyone in your team is joined in as part of this event so that later on the debates can run a lot more smoothly. Okay, I guess hi again if you're new. Of course, just click on this link like we've already said a couple times and just join so that we can make sure the debates can run smoothly later. We're probably going to give it like 1 or 2 more minutes. Yes. Okay. I guess hopefully everyone's already been logged in by now and everyone who wants to be part of the seminar is already on this live stream right now. So I guess with that said, we're just going to get started then. Okay, so hi again, welcome back to OnePwaa Presents WSC Camp Online, and this is going to be the first debate workshop out of 2. And I guess, and your presenter, your speaker today, Savanah or Sav or whatever you want to call me. So I guess I just felt like I should offer a little bit of background on myself first, so you can know how seriously as you want to take my advice and kind of apply that to yourself, and I guess judge that. So starting off with WSC debate, I've coached my school's WSC team, especially in debate, for the past couple years, and our team has placed 4th overall at the Hong Kong regional round. And outside of WSC, I was my school's debate captain, and I held a bunch of debate workshops in school, as well as other competitions within the US and in Hong Kong. I used to be a scholar from Hong Kong, now I'm from the US. Some of you may also recognize me from my meme page, Pwaa. Yes, that's great too. So I guess with that said, that's kind of a little bit about me in the beginning. With that said, that's my background. So I guess we can just get started. Okay, so starting off today, this is going to be a more of a beginner workshop as opposed to Darren's one later on, which is going to get a lot more in-depth with content and such. So I'm going to go over some more of the fundamental basics of debate at first and kind of introduce kind of the motions and how we should be prepping and go over some basic structure and clarity and language usage. So first of all, of course, what is a motion? A motion is a statement or a plan that's about to be debated by both sides, and motions usually are not right or wrong. They either stand or they're fall. That's why they're being debated in the first place, because they're not necessarily clearly black and white issues. They have lots of gray zones in between them, and that's why that's why we bring them into the classroom and we try to debate them under an educational setting. So usually motions will contain 3 or more variables, I like to call them, and these are the variables and these are the keywords that you should be aiming to identify in your prep time, so that these are the words that you're going to be fighting more over. These are the words you're going to be having contentions over. These are the words you're supposed to be debating over and questioning over amongst both teams during the middle of a debate. And in your prep time especially, your team needs to try to identify possible contentions and prepare for those in advance, whether it be writing it on paper or just thinking it over in your head. I mean, one part of being a debater is always just trying to know what type of a learner you are. Are you more of a visual learner? Are you more of an audio-wise learner? And from that, be able to customize your prep time and customize your planning based on kind of what types of debaters you have amongst your team of 3, and hopefully be able to utilize your strengths and weaknesses together to create a stronger team and become a more powerful, debate powerhouse. So first of all, definitely in the first place, you need to be able to identify possible contentions in the motion. I think one thing in WSC that we often lack in debate is clarity and a clear understanding of those motions. And I think if you're able to clearly understand the motions and clearly be able to identify what they're actually trying to get you to talk about, then your debate can be a lot more focused and a lot more relevant, and your speeches can flow a lot better. So, like I said just now, clarity is something we always talk about within WSC, and as you can see here, I attached a fantastic piece of clip art. Yes. So clarity, in my opinion at least, comes from 2 main points. It comes from your structure and it comes from your ability to flow things through logically. Structure-wise, there are a lot of ways you can achieve clarity. One of the ones I see used more commonly is signposting, where at the beginning of your speech you say, today I'm going to be talking about XYZ, my teammate will talk about ABC, and my third teammate will talk about JKL. You bring things out and you bring basically you signpost. Basically you just list out what's going to happen coming on in the debate, and you lay things out clearly for your opponents, for your own team, and for the judge as well. This can be incredibly helpful, as well as transition sentences. This is something that can definitely enhance your structure law. So rather than just saying and or moving on or continuing or something like that, you could use some more complex sentences that build on each other. Choose your language carefully and be able to transition in between those ideas and in between those thoughts with different types of sentences to just make sure your argument builds on top of each other and you can achieve some degree of complexity within your arguments as well. Additionally as well, teamwork and team flow. And within WSC, there is a big criteria for teamwork. I personally believe that every time that my team had better team chemistry, we tend to perform better within the debates itself. Whether or not our arguments were actually better, having better teamwork did actually let the judges look a lot more favorably upon us, and it definitely gave us quite an upper hand within debates. So make sure you know your teammates quite well. I would say it's never going to be a downside to know your teammates personally and to know how all of you work. Again, right? Know what type of debaters you are, know what type of learners you are, so your team can have a better flow and have better work. When we're debating in in-person rounds, within WSC rounds, I know something my team always does in our debate rounds is we all take our chairs and we clutter together in a corner, so we're actually physically closer to each other, so we can actually listen to each other's arguments a lot better. Again, teamwork, team flow is something very important. And lastly, when it comes to structure, you need to try to connect everything back to the motion. It is very hard for a judge to sit through minutes upon minutes of just talking and just listening to people talking and talking and talking. So if you're able to connect everything back to the motion, that can kind of act as kind of a small, quick summary at the end of each individual point, and that can definitely enhance your points and make everything just seem a lot more relevant, seem a lot more clear, especially since a judge, I think some of us who have judged debates before know how hard it is to stay focused for 30 or 40 minutes at a time, listening to everything every single debater is saying. So if a debater is able to connect their points back to the motion, it just makes them seem so much more reliable, so much more relevant, and so much more based in all of their arguments. The next thing I wanted to talk about in terms of clarity is logic. There are lots of transition words we can use. Like I said, rather than just saying and, or and then, there are lots more words, like building on, or to support this, or furthermore. Just kind of offering these more linguistically complex words. They can just enhance the sophistication of your argument, as well as just making everything seem a lot more clear and put together. Logic-wise, it is never a bad thing to just use very simple logic. Even though it makes your argument seem very simplistic, it can actually act as a very great clarifying feature. Talk about how A ties into B, how B ties into C, and then just kind of wrap it all together. Don't be afraid to approach things from a logical point of view. Yeah, that's about clarity. So make sure your speeches are structured and make sure they're logical. Next is structure in terms of your team. So I know a lot of debate around the world does one-on-one or two-on-two, but WSC does three-on-three. Especially I think in Europe and Canada and in the US, they tend to like one-on-one debates more. But team structure is something you can definitely weaponize and use to your advantage. So I like to see the 3 speakers within a WSC team as having their own pretty distinct roles and bringing their own dynamics into the debate. And I think based on what these 3 speakers should be offering, that's how you should maybe talk to your team and decide how you want to organize your team and how you want to put the order of speakers. Your first speaker needs to obviously be the one that defines the keywords in the motion. You need to take the motion and you dissect it and define what part of the motion you would like to present and push more strongly within your side. Creating a model is something that's sometimes important, but also sometimes not, depending on the debate. Of course, you guys are all scholars. We're all relatively smart out here, hopefully. And so I think thus, based on that, we can all figure out whether or not we actually need a model in certain debates. There are some that don't. There are some that do. Just see it to yourself and see if you want that. Like I said before, signposting can be incredibly useful. Signpost for the rest of the team can offer lots of clarity and structure, and just kind of elaborating on 1 or 2 points, and if time permits, offering 1 or 2 pre-buttals. So the first speaker I always see them as a speaker that's much more logical, that's very put together, that's very articulate in their wording as well. This needs to be a speaker that can be very logical in their approaches to things. So I guess based on that, do what you will with that information, figure out how you're going to want to put your speakers as 1, 2, and 3. Second speaker needs to be one that can kind of do a little bit of first and third's job. So I'm going to talk about third first, then we'll jump back to second. Third speaker needs to be the speaker that I like to see is the one that's a little bit more aggressive within the debate. They need to be the one that's a little bit more quick on their feet. They need to, of course, offer lots of rebuttals and clarify points, but also be attacking the main clashes of the debate. And by clash, I'm sure some of us already know what that term means, but I'm going to kind of re-explain, my understanding and my approach to the idea of clash. Like we said before, remember how in a motion, there are going to be multiple variables in that motion. These are basically points that can be changed, can be debated over, and are often the main sources of contention within the debate. The third speaker needs to be the person that can analyze what's been happening in the debate so far and push that towards basically redefining or changing or kind of giving the final their final meaning or how you want to approach that. Third speaker needs to be someone that can identify these clashes, identify, what we've been really fighting over today, and offer their final words on that. And lastly, I think one thing that is very give a biased decision on the outcome, kind of a why we win sort of thing. And I'll be offering a little bit more insight on that towards the end later on, but just so far, that's kind of what you need to have in mind. First speaker, someone that's very articulate, someone that's very logical and very well put together in their language. Third speaker, someone that's a little bit more aggressive, that's a little bit more quick on their feet, and requires a little bit less prep during prep time. Second speaker is actually what I would consider to be one of the harder roles to define what they actually need to do, because they need to do a mix of both. They need to sometimes redefine and justify the terms, and elaborate, clarify, and obviously offer rebuttals as well and attack models. So of course, this is kind of a basic outlook. You don't have to follow this like point for point. Of course, based on your own team's dynamic and what your team is used to be doing, this can be very helpful. This can be really good for your team to kind of figure out, if you're being only introduced to WSC, how you want to set up your team in accordance to the opportunities presented to all 3 speakers. In your individual speech, there is kind of one big question that I always hear people asking a lot, which is whether or not the rebuttals should come first or they should come kind of towards the end of your speech. And I think these both have their pros and cons to them. And depending on what type of debater you are and how you like to offer your points and how you like to present your style, you should probably change this for yourself. So if you rebut your opponent's cases first, this offers structural soundness, right? If you're kind of cleaning the slate, telling your judge, everything they've said before is kind of irrelevant, this is where it starts. It's a very structurally clean way to present things by disproving previous things and introducing new things. It's very clean cut and it's very structurally sound. And this thing also, though, it allows for lots of clash to form because as you're rebutting it, your opponent is coming up with the rebuttal to your rebuttal. So if you're looking for a more complex debate, if you're looking for a debate that's more in depth and that can actually tackle more mature issues as well, sometimes you're going to want to rebut your debate. You're going to want to rebut your opponent's case first in your speech, in your individual speech, to offer that clash room to form. But again, that can also be taken on the other side. If you rebut last in your speech, you can also use this as a weapon. In terms of timing, it can decrease your opponent's engagement opportunities, which means if you state your rebuttals at the end of your speech, your opponent has less time to think of rebuttals to the rebuttals, and that can actually kind of force them into a position where they can't really rebut what you have already rebutted, if that makes any sense. Again, right, these are strategic on both sides. However you want to take this debate, I would never say you should definitely rebut first, you should definitely rebut last, but do it up to yourself. There are pros and cons to both sides. Whenever we're rebutting something, of course within WSC, which is a program that has lots of scholars from all over the world, of course, and sometimes, not all of us have English as our native language, some of us second, third, fourth, some of you polyglots are insane with all I've met a scholar that speaks 7 languages once, it's kind of insane. Within your rebuttals, I think one really important thing to know is just that clarity is always going to be important within WSC debates. Clarity is kind of the one thing that can make or break your team. And the same thing with rebuttals, clarity needs to apply there as well. You need to state the idea you're about to rebut, and you need to state and explain your rebuttal, and then offer an insight as to how you rebutting this damages their case and supports your own case. So this is all just how you need to rebut something within your individual speech. Obviously, of course, within your own points, there are many different styles to do so. Personally, I like to offer kind of a grocery list, what I like to call it. You kind of just write down bullet points of what you're going to rebut and how you're going to rebut it, and just kind of go down in a bullet point list format like that, and just kind of read them off, and in the end say how it damages their case and how it supports yours. Moving on, presentation. So, of course, I think we know that within WSC, presentation is going to be a big point. And although my understanding is that today in our debates, we're not going to be having our video cameras on, I think there's still a lot you can do with your voice and your tonality and basically the way you present your case through an audio format as well. I think we all know that within WSC, we have debate showcases sometimes. And so often within WSC debates themselves, a lot of the times judges will look for good presentation. They will look for entertaining presentation. They will look for presentation that can be attractive to an audience on the stage. And so sometimes I think there is often some confusion about, should we put more stress on the content or on the presentation? And to this, I say presentation is actually one of the more easier points to gain. I think anyone can basically pick this up quickly, and it can be something you can just add into your debate and just kind of slap into it and use it throughout your entire speech to enhance the quality of it. I think there's nothing wrong with trying to make yourself a better presenter in a debate and make yourself just more engaging in general, because that can definitely increase how much your judge is paying attention to you and your content and how much your opponent decides to engage with that as well. So tonality, of course. You want to make sure that the tone of voice you're speaking in is one that is appropriate for your situation. You do not want to use overly formal language or overly casual language. I think both of these are big turnoffs for judges, and they can become either annoying or they can become overly intimidating to your opponents. And just choose wisely, figure out the situation, figure out the dynamic of the context you're in, and kind of choose your tone from there accordingly. Hand gestures. Of course, we don't have hand gestures today because I think, again, like I was saying, my understanding is that we're going to be doing this with our videos off today. But this is something to consider a little bit more in-person rounds. Your hand gestures can mean a lot in debates. I mean, you can see this lovely clip art over here. They are using their hands in fantastic little gestures to offer just to offer a more visual approach. And this can also help you while you're thinking as well. As we fidget, this helps us think more clearly and helps us expend extra energy. bit of science there. Eye contact. This is again something you're going to use more in in-person rounds rather than today, but I think something nevertheless important that we should also kind of touch on slowly. Eye contact is something that can definitely enhance your relationship and can increase the dynamic you have with the judge. This is something that I've used a lot in my own debates, that my teammates have used in their debates, and having eye contact with the judge can increase communication by a ton. It is something you should definitely try to use in your in-person rounds. Often we see, the feedback is always, oh, you're looking down at your flashcards, or oh, you're looking down at your laptop a little bit too much. Eye contact can definitely help with that and can make you just seem a lot more engaged in the debate and can make it seem like you're being a lot more respectful in your speeches as well. Speed. This is something that I personally struggle with a lot. And if you're anything like me, then you also know the struggle of speaking too quickly when you're under pressure. I think I'm doing that slightly a bit now because we're a little bit ahead of schedule, but that's fine. Speed is something we also need to keep in control and keep in the back of our heads. Of course, like we mentioned today, WC has a lot of different levels of English within it, and not all of us are completely fluent native speakers. And so we need to be really accommodating of other scholars and be accommodating of our other opponents, and just make sure that everyone feels comfortable debating in a good and healthy environment that's supportive of everyone's English needs and language needs in general. Engagement. Try as hard as you can to engage your opponents in your speeches. Refer to them. I would say never refer to them by name. Try to refer to them as speaker 1, speaker 2, or speaker 3. This just makes it seem a lot more professional in general, and it makes it a little bit less intimidating, I guess you could say. And lastly, I guess weaponization of language before our big last point. Language can definitely, you can choose vocabulary words that can enhance your points. You can choose words that can definitely bring out the strengths in your cases as well. You can choose words that can work a lot better for you. This is something a little bit more complex and a little bit more advanced, but I think if some of us can do it, then there's no harm in trying. Choosing words and choosing adjectives that can accurately describe your case is something that you can really use to properly capture your case. And when you can have that visual image of your case in other debaters and your other judges' mind, then that can be very helpful. And lastly, of course, I think it goes without saying that we always need to include respect in our debates. There is obviously going to be an ethics policy today about how we should be approaching our debates. Of course, no discrimination, no use of inappropriate language. Of course, I don't think many of us will struggle with that, but I think we always need to be reminded sometimes. Even if we're debating about sensitive topics that might involve certain language use that might be helpful and contribute to the debate, obviously never use the word explicitly itself. There are ways you can talk about it or refer to it indirectly. Those can be a lot more helpful as opposed to using vulgar language in the middle of your speech. So all of that to just say, presentation is, I think WSC often can get a reputation for being a very presentation-based debate, but honestly, debate is it's often about presentation. It's often about how you present your case. Engagement and eye contact and your hand gestures and your tone and your intonation, especially, are you going to be asking questions throughout the debate? Are you going to be stating things? Do you want to raise your voice? Do you want to have influx? All those things can really help enhance the validity and the strength of your speech, and can just make you seem like a much more reliable debater and someone that people can actually enjoy listening to, rather than just hearing, someone shouting off the podium at all times. Moving on, using evidence. This is something that's actually going to be a little bit different in today's debate because we're going to be having online resources. Usually in a WSC round, I think my understanding is that usually you cannot use online resources. You can only use existing ones. You have to turn on airplane mode and whatnot. Today, since there's no way to stop you guys from actually doing this, we decided to just let everyone go ahead and use online resources. I would say my best advice with that is just that you need to be selective with your resources. Only bring in evidence that is relevant to your point. Do not just spew facts up on the stage. Bring in cases and bring in points that are actually useful, are going to be beneficial towards your case. One thing that I think happens, especially in the US and in Canada and in the UK, and not in the UK, sorry, in Europe, when I see people debating, is that they often use opinion articles in their debate as evidence. And this can be evidence kind of, I guess, of what a key stakeholder might think. Usually opinion articles are not, valid evidence. There are a lot better pieces of evidence out there that we can use. Opinion articles can easily be debunked. So I would just say be careful if you're going to think about using someone's opinion article from like the New York Times or something like that. Just be careful. Try to lean towards facts if you're trying to build a logically sound case. Another misconception people frequently get is that more evidence makes a better argument. This is obviously going to be untrue. That doesn't I think we've all kind of seen some examples of debate speeches in which people just kind of spew facts and they don't really offer any analysis or any insight into what they're actually talking about. I would say even sometimes it's better to have a speech that's purely based on analysis and purely based on reasoning rather than one purely just spewing facts and purely spewing evidence. Of course, do not use all of your prep time searching online. I know I fall into this trap sometimes too. When I'm debating outside of WSC, sometimes when you have internet access, you tend to use your prep time searching online because it makes you feel better and it offers more reassurance. I would just say, please try to, think your speech through. Think your priorities through. Do not try to use evidence that is not going to be relevant. Do not try to use opinion articles. More evidence does not make a better argument. And last, like we mentioned before, we don't just want to just take these facts and just state them clearly out loud. We want to be able to connect them back to everything and make it seem relevant. Like I said in the beginning of this presentation, you want to be able to connect things back to what you're actually talking about. So when you actually give a fact, what I like to do personally when I give evidence is I present the fact itself in its purest form, and then I explain why it's relevant, and then I connect it back to the motion and explain why that enhances and can improve my team's case. So of course, make everything connect back to your motion. Of course, relevance is key. You want to always try to be bringing that back to the motion, making your case seem much more neat and clear and well structured and put together. Strategy. I think this is the part that gets a lot of scholars really excited whenever we talk about this, but there are many strategies you can use, and I'm just going to be introducing some of the more common ones I see used amongst scholars in debates a lot. The first one is creating a criteria. This is something that is actually, I see it used in almost every single debate, where you choose a criteria to judge what you're talking about, and you create it. You explain why it's the criteria, how your team fulfills the criteria, and how your opponents have failed to fulfill that criteria. This can be really helpful in terms of when it comes down to ethics, especially, and judging things or weighing like pros and cons of things. Criteria creation can become really useful in laying things out very clear and simple. And if your teammates if your opponents use a criteria against you, of course, debunk, why should this be the judging criteria? Why should these be our standards? Why can't these be our standards instead? Introduce something new. I think that's one thing we always need to remember in debate. Whenever you disprove something, or when you debunk something, or when you try to rule something as illegitimate, you always need to remember to offer another solution as well. Otherwise, you just seem like an unproductive person who's not offering any solutions. Whenever you offer a negative or point out a negative, always offer a positive to balance that out. It just makes you seem like a much more positive debater. It makes you seem like a much more productive debater, and it makes you seem like someone that's actually creating value within the debate community. Creating a characterization. This is something that I see us using a lot, even subconsciously as well, which is when you kind of try to characterize an event or a person or or a concept or an organization in general, just kind of listing the benefits and the disadvantages of it, and kind of explaining, why those matter to the debate. Again, right? We're linking everything back into the debate. We're linking everything we talk about back into this debate in general. We're linking everything back to the motion. We have to characterize things, and in that case, we can weaponize that and kind of use that to explain and create kind of a concept of what we're trying to do within the judge's mind itself. Lastly, on strategy, we have a BJD, a biased judicial decision. In this case, like we talked about previously, this is kind of a summary of what's been happening in the debate so far. I would say a speaker that does this is someone that can identify key points made by both sides. Usually this is the third speaker, once all the debate has calmed down, once everything is kind of at its end, the third speaker can come in, identify the clashes, identify the key points, and explain who takes those clashes, who wins the clashes, who has offered better arguments on the variables, so to speak, within the debate. And often something that can also really help is explaining why your team wins according to this judging rubric. I'm sure we all have access to the WSC judging rubric online. I think it's on scholarscup.org. It has a really clear explanation of, how things are going to be judged by your adjudicators. And if you can find this and use this in your debates, it can be incredibly helpful and it can be incredibly useful to explain why your team wins according to the judges. according to the rubric. I know as sometimes judging debates myself, I know this is incredibly helpful because sometimes when the judge kind of slacks off or doesn't listen, this can be a really persuasive point because you are basically explaining to the judge why you win on the judge's term in the judge's language that they can understand. This can be incredibly useful. So I think if you run out of time as a third speaker, definitely try to use this. Even if not, try to squeeze this into your debate. It can be incredibly helpful and incredibly important. So as just like some last tips, never compromise. You are pushing your ideas. I think generally speaking, negotiation tends to lead to a lot of complexity and a lot of complications. And in a debate which is kind of 4 minutes, 3-on-3, it's not an incredibly long debate. These aren't like there are obviously lots of relatively longer speeches. We don't have time to really negotiate and try to balance things out and come to like strong conclusions. Try to just push your ideas forward. These are your 4 minutes. This is like your point. This is your time to kind of shine, I guess. So just don't try to negotiate with the other side. Rarely agree with them, only when it helps your case. And remember, you're pushing your ideas. You have limited time. And just try to keep that in mind. Don't try to negotiate. Don't try to be nice, in the debate. When time is limited, you are pushing your own ideas. Definitions. Often people will see the other team define something differently as them, and they'll just think, oh, dang it, I have to go along with their definitions now. No, if you disagree with their definitions, redefine them and explain why your own definitions are more relevant and more appropriate to the debate. This is something that can be incredibly helpful. I keep saying that. This is something that can be incredibly beneficial towards your team when it comes down to seeing who's more relevant within the debate, who's more relevant to the motion itself. And of course, that brings us into our last point of the day, which is understanding the motion. I have an example motion right here. This house would place all produced plastic waste into landfills. Not an especially WSC related motion, but I guess just this is an example of how sometimes debate motions aren't just what they seem to be on the surface level. Sometimes debate motions are not just like about, whether or not the plastic should be in the landfills. It has underlying meanings to it as well. And I think if you're able to identify the underlying meanings and identify, what it's actually trying to get you to argue about, truly understanding the motion can make your argument so much more complex and can make you a much more sophisticated debater yourself. When this motion place all produced plastic waste into landfills, it is not asking you whether or not plastic needs to be in landfills. It is more or less asking you about responsibility and plastic effects on the environment, about kind of like ethical responsibilities that corporations have themselves. Being able to see through emotion and kind of like get to its core and figure out what it's actually trying to ask you just makes your entire debate so much more sophisticated and so much more well put together. So wow. Like I said, right? Speed can be an incredibly it can make or break you. And I guess in this case we are a little bit ahead of schedule, but I think that might be fine because we might have some tech issues later on, but let's just try to see how this goes, okay? So I guess moving on now, if you have any questions, I guess you can feel free to DM me between now and when the debates start. Like I said, I'm on Instagram on my main page and also on my own personal account as well at SavvyJ if you really want to do that. But yeah, if nothing else, please go, I guess now, join the Mixed Ideas server for the WSCamp debates and just try to make sure that we remember what we've talked about today. I think especially just on one final last note, just keep in mind the whole respect thing, just try to make sure that you're accommodating of all your other fellow scholars. Make sure this is a respectful environment to be in. I know this, the OnePwaa team has put in a ton of work in this, and we don't want this to end badly for anyone. We want everyone to have a good experience out here. So if everyone can just try to please keep in mind to just try to be respectful, try to be accommodating, and try to make this a comfortable space for all scholars to practice under. This is by no means an official round, but this is a great way to practice for the rounds when they start up again. So just please try to keep in mind, lots of different scholars are here from all across the world at all different times. I know it's like almost close to midnight where I'm at. Just trying to make sure we're all accommodating and we're all sensitive to each other's needs. And with that said, I guess thank you for tuning in today. Please make your way over to, I guess, Mix Idea, and I guess just kind of get together with your team, maybe even talk about some of the things we've been talking about today in today's presentation. I guess I can go over back to let's go over to the presentation slide, right? This is something that we can use a lot today in our vocal, in the vocal aspect and the audio aspect of our debate today. And yeah, just go from there. And I hope to see you guys soon within the debates itself. And of course, good luck to everyone. And hope you all have a great time here. Thank you.